find such a love at our age. Whoever thought we could dance on a thrilling...
Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I'm your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmer.
Hello, Judy. Hello, viewers and listeners. Judy, tell folks the title.
From International Model to Relationship Architect, an interview with Shelley Lewin.
And we just finished that interview through the wonders. I mean, Zoom is weird, amazing enough, weirdly amazing enough. But, she's in South Africa and we're here in Vermont, and we just had this conversation like we were
sitting in the room with each other.
And it was a really enjoyable conversation, too.
She's just very smart and delightful and great conversation.
Yep. So please do stay tuned for that. Before we do that, we've got so many exciting things to talk about, don't we? Let me talk about my book that just came out.
Please do.
You might be able to hold... Yes, you've got a copy of it over there.
I do.
It is...
Betrayal and Forgiveness, How to Navigate the Turmoil and Learn to Trust Again.
That is my book that just came out. We're recording this on July 12th of 2024. It just came out a little over a month ago. And... been getting some very nice feedback about it, and it is available anywhere you want to buy books. There's the Amazon one where I especially hope that people will do reviews, because that's how people find out about books these days. But you can also order it. I recently posted a picture of the book in a Barnes & Noble store, which
An actual
store, which I was really pleased about. And so you can get it there, and any bookstore can order it for you. It's also available in Kindle form and also as an audiobook, which is also proving fairly popular, actually. Any place you get audiobooks, you ought to be able to get it as well. So please check that out. I have some other books as well that I will, of course, buy my other books too. Let's talk about your book.
Oh, yes, my book. That would be The Blue Tent, Erotic Tales from the Bible by Laria Zilber.
Good old Laria Zilber, who I've often said to Judy, I have to tell you, I have this real super crush on Laria. But somehow Judy's never offended by that.
Never offended.
Yes. That is Judy's alter ego.
My alter ego.
And it's a beautiful, beautiful book of erotica. If you like erotica, you will love this book, I think.
And if you've never read erotica, this is a very good intro to it.
It is. And it's not merely erotica, but it's biblical erotica, which sounds like an oxymoron, but isn't. It isn't at all. Bless you.
Me. Thank you.
It is based on characters from the Bible. I think all of these are from the Torah. I think. No, they're from Tanakh.
Yes, they're all Old Testament.
Yeah, well, what Christians would call the Old Testament, right? The Hebrew Bible, and they're just beautiful and based on understandings that you did not make up.
I did not.
You certainly fleshed them out, shall we say?
Yes,
but they are based on midrash. Those of you who are Jewish or know that term, midrash.
If not, Google it.
Yeah, Google midrash, and you'll see.
M-I-D-R-A-S-H,
right,
like midrash.
Exactly. Midrash. Yeah. Sometimes you see it with an M-E-D because in the frum world they'll sometimes say medrash.
Yeah.
Medrash. But anyway, do check that out. So let's get on with our interview.
Yes.
And we'll see you on the other side.
Our guest today is Shelley Lewin. Shelley is a leadership and relationship coach in private practice as the relationship architect. As Shelley describes it, her journey into this work began when her fiancé left her, and she realized that being an international model was not an asset for building a healthy relationship. It takes more than beauty and money. This led her to seek training in personal development, and she went on to create her practice, working with individuals, couples, and Fortune 100 company leaders. Shelley's book is Uncomplicated Love, a step-by-step guide to building a thriving relationship. Shelley, welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, we're delighted.
Yeah, from the other side of the planet.
Yes, for our listeners and viewers who don't know it, I mean, Shelley is in Cape Town, South Africa, and we are in Vermont in the United States. And so it's kind of amazing that you can do this sort of thing,
Exactly.
That's
I mean,
right. Is it evening there, but it's probably winter?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
Wow. That is just an amazing
As you
thing.
can see by the polar neck.
Yeah, wow. And I'm old enough to remember before well, before video calls, of course, and I'm old enough to remember before instantaneous video communication across continents was possible. And here we are just doing this as a matter of
I
course. So
know.
thank you for doing this.
Amazing.
So we always like to
Thank you
start
for
off
having
by,
me.
yeah, we always like to start off by asking our guests, how did you get into this work? Tell us something about your own journey into it.
Well, you alluded to it in the intro, and just to say that, people would think that on the outside that you've got it all going if you're working as a model and traveling around the world. But actually, my life was a bit of a shambles and my relationships were disastrous. And I was very fortunate at the time to meet a coach, a transformational coach who did some deep coaching with me. And he was always asking the question, what does success look like for you? What does fulfillment look like to you? How do you want your life to make an impact? In what way are you wanting? And these questions sat with me, and I just didn't have the answers. And I decided to take a personal development course and training, which was part of the Lifeline counseling. And I just realized from that experience, first of all, from my coaching conversations with Howard, how unhappy I was and how I needed to change my life if I wanted to feel like I was living a more soulful life and more true to myself. But I wasn't entirely sure how to do that or what that looked like. So I started on that journey and then realized that actually it was so powerful, and our conversations were so profound that I wanted to be able to do that for other people. So it then led me to doing counseling psychology. And then from the counseling psychology, I started my counseling practice, which then I realized actually I love the coaching. So I did a module in the very last module of my applied psychology, and they showed us the difference between a counseling conversation and a coaching conversation, and I just felt much more aligned with the coaching. So I decided, okay, so I've studied the wrong thing, now what? So I ended up doing a coaching course after that, and essentially my couple counseling evolved into relationship coaching.
Uh-huh.
And so that's really, yeah, it's been this journey for the last 2 decades.
Now, Bruce is a therapist. I'm not. So if you could tell me and our listeners what the difference is between psychology, like therapy, versus coaching.
Okay, great. So traditionally in, say, a counseling or therapy type of conversation, you will be asking what problem brings you here today, and you will be exploring all of the things that have contributed, and it tends to be a problem and past focused conversation. So you tend to be looking historically, going right back into even childhood and exploring what happened and what contributed towards all the things that where you are today. And that can be very therapeutic. It doesn't necessarily help people to move forward. So a coaching conversation is what we would describe as future and solution oriented. So we're looking to say, what is this desired future that you have, or this preferred reality? And what is the change that needs to happen to get you to move forward in that direction? So who do you need to be? Who do you need to become for that future and that reality? So you're consistently working on your future self, basically. So you're pulled forward towards this future self rather than healing something from the past. So I'd say that's the biggest difference between the two.
It's an interesting distinction you're making, that I think that distinction was especially true maybe 30 years ago or so, because I think what's happened on the therapy side or the counseling side of that is it's evolved to be a lot more like the coaching you just described.
Oh, great.
In a lot of ways. So that,
Okay.
I look at it and I say, well, I can see why people would have thought of a difference if you're thinking of the way people were trained to be therapists quite a while ago. But it's,
Yes.
there's such a thing as solution-oriented therapy, which is very much the
Therapy.
thing you're describing.
Exactly.
And so
Solution
the
focused.
distinction
Yeah.
isn't as clear. But it is interesting because that phenomenon of focusing on the past and
Mhm.
focusing on causes really fits with a view of therapy as if it's part of the medical model. It was part of
Yes,
that, you know, and of course,
exactly.
That
The
like closest
pathology.
analysis, right?
well,
Hmm.
analysis is something like that as well. Yeah, it's really it's a similar kind of concept. Like go for those things that are causing your problem and get
Yeah.
rid of those and you'll be cured. And of
Yes.
course, a lot of us in the therapy side of things have recognized, no, this medical model thing, it was because we wanted to get paid by insurance, but that was really a devil, you know.
Exactly.
So,
So
yeah.
I was being asked, people would call me, and unless I could give a diagnosis,
Right.
they weren't able to give financial support.
Yes.
So it was, I was kind of stuck because then I had to decide whether I wanted to stay in that, and people would often then they don't necessarily have the money to do the coaching because I'm not giving, there's no code that I
Yeah.
can give, there's no
Yeah.
pathology.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is I wrote about that actually in one of my books when I was talking about the problem of doing a treatment plan for couples therapy. And I
Yes,
pointed out, well, the only problem is it's not treatment and there's no plan. Other than that, I'm happy to give you a treatment plan. I
yes.
don't know what I'd say, but that's what I used to have to do when I did accept insurance. I actually stopped it about a year ago. Finally said,
Oh,
I don't need
Yeah.
to be doing that anymore. And, you know, I did feel a little bad because, as you point out, you know, that does make it less available to some folks. I'm an old guy now,
exactly.
so I figured I've paid my dues, you know, but so it
And
goes.
speaking of books, you say
Yeah.
in your book that people are complicated, but
Mm,
relationships are not. So can you
yes.
tell us what you
I
mean by
thought,
that?
it's funny because your couple therapy in 7 words. And I thought if I had to say couple therapy in under 7 words, which 7 words would I choose? And it would be that people are complicated, relationships are not.
If you put in an
So
and there, you get seven. So there you
7,
go.
exactly.
So you go in 6 words. So tell us about that. Talk to us about
So
that.
the idea is that it isn't that relationships are complicated. It's that we make our lives complicated by not standing up for ourselves, by allowing people to treat us badly, by not holding our boundaries. So it's the things that we are doing that causes the relationships to be complicated.
Hmm.
So this idea is that love doesn't hurt us. It's our behavior and our lack of taking care of ourselves and having boundaries and not looking after ourselves that causes the love to hurt us. But if we befriend ourselves and we have our primary relationship with ourself, and we love ourselves, self-care, self-compassion, self-worth, self-assurance, if that's the first relationship that we prioritize, then I truly believe that your relationship with self determines the quality, or the quality of your relationship with yourself determines the quality of your relationships with others.
Mhm.
So that's the first place to start.
Mhm.
And we can make it more or less complicated by hanging around in relationships where someone doesn't value us, and then it becomes a power game and a power struggle, and it can become very complicated, or not. You can just be very clear around how you want to be treated, and you don't settle for anything less than that. And of course it also means you need to step up and be a great partner too. So I'm not saying
Mhm.
you just show up and expect to be treated brilliantly. It's a team. So
Right.
there's two of you, and you have to show up as an A team player if you want to be in an A team.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Did
Yes.
you want to add to something?
Yeah, it
Something
did.
like
Well, I
what?
just wanted to follow up on some of that,
Mm,
that concept of setting boundaries. There's an implication there, and I think you address it in your book as well. You have to be willing to call it quits. In other words, part of
yes.
having a boundary is, there's some bottom line somewhere. Maybe it's a little fuzzy, but
Yes.
there better be a bottom line somewhere. How
Exactly.
would you advise folks when is it time to call it quits from your perspective?
Yeah. So I think that the core thing for me is if you have to become a different version of yourself to make the relationship work, then it's not going to be sustainable. So, there's this idea that we kind of have, this emotion, this need to become our authentic self. So this is actually based on the work by Dr. Gabor Mate, and he says that we have these two core drivers. The one is attachment. So we really need and want to belong and be attached. And then the other is to become our authentic self. And what happens is in our childhood, you're willing to sacrifice your authenticity in order to belong, because if your caregiver is expecting or needing you to behave in a particular way, as a child, you will do what you need to do. You'll be the quiet one, the funny one, the smart one, the responsible one. You figure out who you need to be in order to get your parents' love and attention and care. And so you adapt yourself so that you are loved by your caregiver. And then you become an adult and you realize that perhaps, that's not who I am. And I don't want to be that person anymore. And you grow and you evolve and become your authentic self. And then you have to make a decision that sometimes the person who I am and want to be in the world will cost me my relationships. And so at some point, there's a need to just be yourself. And that will be the cost. So the opportunity is that you get to live a life that's fulfilling and aligned, and that you get to become the version of yourself that you want to be in the world. But it might mean that you're going to lose some of the attachments along the way. So all those adaptations that you made in order to fit into several relationships, those relationships might not allow you or want you to change and evolve in the way that you want to.
It's interesting when you're describing that. You've also commented, and I think I pulled out the quote somewhere. I don't have it in front of me, but that idea that you learn from, there are no failed relationships. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
You learn
Yes.
from it. And what you were just describing, it sounds like so-called failed relationships along the way are learning opportunities to learn what you're needing in a partner.
Exactly.
It's funny.
Exactly. 100%.
We've sometimes commented there's a four-word answer to what couple therapy is, which is find the right person,
Yes,
And
exactly.
you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find the princess,
Exactly.
right? Yes.
100%.
Could you please
And
talk about that? Yeah.
yeah, so there's a whole chapter in the book called The Art of People Pairing. And the idea of that is that compatibility is so dating is due diligence. So in the same way that we pair food and wine, for example. So when we pair food and wine, it didn't, if you were a sommelier and you are trying to decide which wine goes with which food, it's going to take a lot of trial and error and lots of experiments before you realize, oh, this combination is a fantastic combination. It brings out the best of both. That combination has this really harmonious, smooth, beautiful cohesion when you put these two together. And then you can put some things together and it it actually extracts the worst out of both of the flavors, that it becomes this sort of chaotic, horrible dissonance. So I see that when you put any two things together, when you try and merge any two things, and relationship is resonance, when you put any two things together, it's going to have a harmonious, beautiful connection and symphony, or it creates this chaotic impact, or it's neutral. So it's kind of like those are your options. And so when you're going through dating and meeting lots of people, it's either going to be this neutral, kind of bland, not much, or it's going to be this amazing connection and bond, or it is that chaotic one. So if it's chaotic, it's like, it's to be an observer. Oh, this is not great. I don't feel like I can be myself. I don't think that this person is drawing out the best in me, and I don't think we're drawing out the best in each other, actually. That it's a chaotic connection, that the resonance isn't there. So then instead of beating myself up, devaluing myself, devaluing the other person, it's just that it's neither a good or bad partner, it's just a better or worse fit or match. So it's not a good match. Okay, so what did I learn from that? What would make it a better match? And so the idea is, that's what I mean by due diligence. Dating is due diligence, that you're just learning every time you date someone who is going to be a better combination or worse combination. So what parts worked well? Great, make a note, that part worked well, and which parts didn't work well. So it's very pragmatic, I understand that, but it works.
So why do you think some people make the same mistakes? They go from one relationship and then they find a partner, and then after a few months they say, oh, this is just like my ex. So why do you think people make that same mistake over and over again?
So the answer to that for me is in that attachment styles, and I'm not sure, how much I need to say about attachment styles, but it's understanding the way in which, so you can change the wrapping of the person, but the fundamental relationship dynamics, so if you are so you have secure attachment and insecure attachment. And secure attachment is that I feel safe and comfortable with intimate relationships, for example. Insecure attachment has two options, anxious and avoidant. So if you're avoidant, you keep people at arm's length because you want and need it's like being fiercely independent. So you sort of push people away, and then you pull them in, and then you push them away, and then you pull them in. You don't feel, so you're wanting to keep your autonomy, and you're wanting to feel independent. And what happens is that there's that push-pull, push-pull, push-pull that happens, and that dynamic will keep playing out. Then you think it's the person that's the problem, okay? Or you have an anxious attachment, which is that you really feel like, in order to feel close to somebody, I want to merge with them. It's like I want to be enmeshed and cling, and it's like quite a dependent relationship. I feel quite clingy. I need for you to fill my needs. And so that can become quite a toxic dynamic as well. So both of these insecure attachments can become quite toxic. And then you go, okay, I've had enough, I'm over it. And you break up with a person. Another person comes in, it's you that's creating those dynamics. So until you address your attachment style, if it is an insecure attachment style, then you're going to just keep replacing the person. So new wrapping, but you will create the same dynamic.
Yeah.
Because it's you're the common denominator in that.
Yeah, it's interesting, the attachment stuff. I want to mention for our listeners, Sue Johnson was very much all about the attachment stuff as applied, and she just died a few weeks ago. So I just want to
I didn't
mention
know
that. Yeah. So she sort of tribute to her. It's funny, at one point I remember a couple of years ago saying, "Oh, it'd be wonderful if we could get her on," and never got a chance to. But yeah, she describes a lot of what you're talking about. And it's interesting with the attachment stuff, because do I have this statistic right? As I recall reading somewhere, it's only about 40% of people or so that are securely attached.
Correct, 100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm always amused. I always look, theories like that are so useful, but don't take them too seriously. Because a theory that says, well, fewer than half of us are actually okay, and most of the rest of us are messed up.
Yes, but you must remember that
Yes.
it's not something that you can't change.
Yes,
so it's
absolutely.
not like, it's a tendency that you have. It's a relationship dynamic. You can change that. So when I started my journey, I was avoidant attachment, and I was always, and it's not a surprise that I was, as you said in the intro, I was traveling around the world, and I was never really emotionally available for anybody, really. So I would sort of dip into a relationship, and when I felt like, oh, this is suffocating me, then I would push the person away again. So that dynamic was the dynamic that I was enacting out in every relationship, thinking there's something wrong with these people.
Yeah.
And then when I discovered, hold on, maybe it's me. And then I realized, okay, so how do I need to evolve and grow?
Yeah.
What's the transformation that I need in order to feel okay and safe and comfortable in a healthy relationship? And so I was very clear in that, talking about the compatibility. When I was looking for a partner, I was looking for someone who illustrated that they had secure attachment.
Which
So
was
that
that required you to grow into that as well. Yeah.
exactly. So my husband was incredibly, he had this secure attachment, and I knew I was going to be learning from him. Like, I knew that if he pointed a finger, it was probably me that was going to be at fault, because I knew that he knew how to do relationships well.
Yeah. Which is lovely that you can find someone like that. And of course, what's
Yes.
tricky in a lot of relationships is that neither of the two parties are there. And
Yes, or
so,
they
yeah,
don't even realize, first of all, what their attachment style is.
yeah.
And so that's why I actually, in my book, um, uh, I talk about the art, science, and practices
Mm,
of love. So the art is the compatibility, that art of finding this person who's a good match for you. The science is the science of attachment and understanding the role that attachment plays in the relationship dynamics that you create. And then the practices is showing up as a team player. So the practices of being a teammate, which is be kind, don't panic, have faith.
uh-huh. Couldn't have said that better myself. Yes, indeed. Yeah, something else you've said, which I noted down as I was reading. You noted that relationships shouldn't be measured by longevity. Do you know what I mean? It's not about. I've
Yes.
often thought about that. Occasionally, I'll see somebody's practice website where they'll talk about their statistics of how many people, how many relationships they stayed together. And of course, I'm always really skeptical about that because you can't always tell, and you can't even always tell if that's a good outcome or not. It's sort of
Exactly.
not for me to judge that. There are three people involved in couples therapy, and there may be three different opinions, including mine. There may be three different opinions about was this good or wasn't this good, and often it's mixed. But I'm curious if you could comment on that. What do you mean that relationships shouldn't be measured by longevity?
The reason that I say that is because there's a lot of couples that are together for 30, 40, 50 years, and it's dreadful. It's like a carcass. They're married, yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a healthy relationship, and that both of them are thriving. So for me, a relationship should be measured by its health and the ability of the two people in that relationship to thrive. So that's the way that I would define a healthy relationship is, are you creating a relationship where I can challenge, encourage, and inspire you to become the best version of yourself. And if, again, it comes back to, if I need you to be a different version, if you need to change, and I require for you to change in order for this relationship to work, well, then we're not actually in a healthy relationship. Then it's not a good match.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. There's a paradox that comes up in that, which I always love to. I'm a sucker for a good paradox, as people who work with me
I
know
love
that.
them
I love
too.
ironies, and one of the ironies, because you mentioned challenge as part of it. Do you know what I
Yes,
mean? I'm reminded
absolutely.
of Jack Moran in the erotic equation, where he notes that obstacles are really necessary for excitement. That attraction plus obstacles equals excitement. Sort of implicit in what you're saying. You want to be with someone, if you have a couple that is perfectly harmonious. Well, I'm also a composer, I'm a musician composer. And when you
Okay.
compose stuff that is totally that there's no dissonances, whatever, it's really
Yes.
boring. And there needs to be
Yes.
a bit of spice there, and a couple,
Absolutely.
challenging each other, I think that's what you were pointing
Yes,
out, right? That's
exactly.
part of the mix. Could you
Yeah,
comment on that?
I don't think that challenges is so the association is that challenge is the thing where we grow and evolve. So if you
Yeah.
think about, if there's no challenge, if everything is simple and stable, then we're not going to evolve as individuals or as a couple. So it requires some adversity and some challenge for us to keep evolving and growing.
Mhm.
And so I almost feel like the couples that I've worked with, and there's been a few where they have said that we never fight, for
Mhm.
example,
Yeah.
okay? But that doesn't mean that that's a good thing. It's like they'll say it as if it's something we should be celebrating. But not fighting, does that mean that you're unhappy, but you're not discussing things?
Yeah,
You know?
I've heard that one as well. Well, I
We
don't
don't
think we
fight.
don't fight, but we certainly disagree.
Yes,
In other words, that
exactly,
we are different
exactly,
people and we challenge each other in that way,
exactly. And
and
you
we
can
celebrate
have,
it.
We can
Yeah.
talk about it
We can talk about it.
without killing each
Well,
other.
exactly. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, well, I think because
exactly.
we each tend that feel it's a stimulus to growth,
Hmm.
as opposed to, oh my God, this is such a downer.
Hmm.
And yeah, people who are avoiding any sort of difference, and that's where it tends, one of my shticks is I talk about stability and intimacy as both being important. Reminds me a little, maybe I'm just trying to compulsively map everything onto my system, but Gabor
Yes,
Mate's idea of, attachment, both attachment and authenticity. I
yes,
could map onto the notion of stability and intimacy. That attachment is all
exactly.
about avoiding the anxiety of difference, whereas authenticity is about actually experiencing who you are, which that requires tolerance of anxiety. And what intimacy requires is that tolerance for anxiety. That's where growth is going to happen. And you talk
You
about
talk
that
about
as well. Yeah. Could
intimacy.
you tell us about how do you understand intimacy? When, why is intimacy such a challenge?
Well, so just in terms of what is intimacy, so there are four. So I'm going to give credit to Matthew Kelly, who wrote the 7 levels of intimacy, and he speaks about the 4 aspects. So there's so physical intimacy, which is what most people associate with intimacy, but sex is not intimacy. It's physical, emotional, intellectual or psychological, and spiritual. So physical intimacy, we all understand. Emotional intimacy is psychologically safe environments where you feel like I can share whatever I'm thinking, and I'm not going to be my partner's not going to be dismissive. He's not going to trivialize, or he or she, it's safe for me to share what I'm thinking and feeling. So that's emotional intimacy. And then intellectual or the intellectual intimacy is about that there are no hot topics. So, we can have totally different opinions on politics, religion, wherever our differences are, and we can agree to disagree. That you're not going to tell me, oh, you're an idiot because you think that, or so the intimacy is that I can share my inner world with you, and you can hold it and honor it, and even if you don't agree, that's okay. So the idea is then that when we have this physical and this emotional and this intellectual intimacy, that those 3 create spiritual intimacy, which is almost like the relationship becomes the vehicle. It's transcendent.
Mhm.
It allows the vehicle for God's work in a way. It's
Mhm.
like it allows us to really step into much deeper levels and layers than just the basic everyday today stuff, so it's taking the relationship to transformation, that it allows you to transform.
Yeah, it's where I think you're saying 1 + 1 = 3. Right?
Exactly.
It's the sum is greater than
The
just the
parts.
sum of its parts. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, and I think that if we have an association, so all of these are words, but words and what we associate, as you sort of mentioned, challenge to some people is seen as a negative thing, but actually I see challenge as opportunities. So it all depends on your relationship with words and your definitions of things. And so part of coaching and part of the relationship coaching is helping people to change their definitions and their associations with things as being positive or negative. And I think that there's a big injustice, or you're losing a lot when you judge things as good or bad, right or wrong, positive or negative, and rather just see, is it working? How does it serve me? Where is it not serving me? What can I change? To not need for things to be black or white.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're describing, I think, an attitude toward the world of acceptance as, there's a validity to all of it, even when things are awful.
Exactly.
The word I throw around for that is faith. That's what I mean by have faith.
Okay.
It's that
Yes.
acceptance that reality's right to be what it is, even when it's painful, even when we can't possibly understand, because we don't have all the information, we never do. We can't
Yes.
understand all the forces. But that mindset that would say, okay, I can work with this. I think that's how I hear what you're describing. That notion that
Absolutely.
challenges are
Absolutely.
necessary and valid, and somebody being different from me is the way things should be, and I'll have to work with that. And of course, sometimes it
Yes.
means it's a deal breaker. We're
Exactly.
both fine
Yeah.
people, but we can't be together. And sometimes it's like, wow, you're making me grow, and that feels great. And it feels like we're creating something, something sacred.
Yeah. And so actually the word that just came up for me is that it's discernment versus judgment.
Yeah, you talk about that in your book.
Yeah. So judgment is that I'm deciding this is good and this is bad. Discernment says this works for me and this doesn't work for me.
Mhm.
And so actually, in many ways, that's the dating, is you're trying to discern who is a good fit for you.
Yeah.
And so when you are able to embrace life and to just be discerning in life, that's really just be discerning and not be judgmental. There's this big push, oh, don't be judgmental, don't be judgmental. But then people, many, I sometimes catch myself as well, not non-judgmental doesn't mean stop be discerning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Particularly with respect to choosing a partner. It's interesting. I've occasionally run into this where folks are just so afraid to somehow seem unfair. They're
Yes.
saying, well,
Yes.
but I want, we're both Jewish, right? When I was briefly single, I was thinking, well, I know I need a Jewish woman. It's not that I don't think that non-Jewish women are good people. Of course, everybody's good the way they are,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't have worked for me.
Yes,
But if I
exactly.
were hiring somebody into my business and I insisted they be Jewish, that would be prejudicial. It'd be illegal in
Yes.
a lot of ways in our country, and I imagine in many countries. But not for selecting a partner. That's what discernment is all about. It's like,
Exactly.
it wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what's going to work for you,
Mhm.
how will you know when that person arrives?
Mhm.
Exactly. So
So
let me ask you,
yeah.
do you work with individuals as well? Like, what if somebody comes to you, they're not partnered, they say, I just suck at relationships. How can I be better at that? Is that something
Yes.
that you work with as well?
Yes. Yeah. So I have what I call 5 lanes that I work in. So the first lane is for singles, and it's called dating deliberately. And dating deliberately is how to become someone for whom a healthy relationship is possible. So it's really unpacking and exploring, being conscious and objective about finding a life partner, looking at all the narratives that you have about love and relationships and dating and what your beliefs are, and looking at those definitions and really trying to, to enter into relationships from a place where now I have the skills and the tool to make a relationship work. So that's the piece, the dating deliberately piece. Then I have, it's called people pairing, and that's around preparing for partnering. So so the people pairing is that you are premarital, or it's even just a pre-committed couple, and I will be teaching tools. So how, when I spoke about the practices, teaching tools to help them to learn how to be more effective as a team. So you're a small team. So what does that mean? And I help them to figure out for themselves, what do we need for this to become an A-team partnership? What do we need for us both to be able to thrive in this relationship? So that's the premarital. Then I have the resilient love, which is couples in conflict, which would be sort of traditional couple counseling, couple therapy, relationship coaching, which I mentioned, which is now we're not in a great place, and we're going to figure out how to restore or renovate this relationship. Then there's crossroads coaching, which is ambivalent couples. And that's for couples that aren't sure whether or not they want to stay together. So it hasn't been working, one or both are thinking like, oh, I'm on the fence. Do I even feel like staying in this relationship, and sort of trying to make it work? And so that has a very different feel, because what we're trying to work out in that scenario is what would make you more willing to stay? What needs to change in this relationship so that you actually want to be here?
That's,
And so that's
Bill Doherty. Does that name ring a bell? I think Bill Doherty has something very similar
yes.
to that. Yeah,
Oh,
where
really?
he talks about, I forgot the term he uses, very similar to what you're describing, where it's a short term, I forgot how many
Yes,
sessions, a few sessions,
exactly.
focused
Exactly.
specifically on, do you want to work on this or don't you? And it's
Exactly.
very different from trying to fix things and with the assumption
Correct.
that you're staying together. Yeah.
Yes. And so if you enter into any therapist or coach's relationship coach environment, and the assumption is we're trying to fix this, you're going on a completely, the trajectory and the kinds of questions that you're doing is going to be very different. So for me, it's around if you want to make this work, or how do we make this work? So I'm very clear before I work with a couple, is this an if conversation or a how conversation?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last piece, the fifth lane, is conscious uncoupling, where a couple knows that it's that the relationship has ended, and they just want to make it as amicable as possible.
Especially, I suppose, if they have kids, that's
Children,
especially critical.
exactly. Yeah. And so I don't have an attachment to people staying together, because I believe that if the relationship is not healthy for both of them, they're much better off moving and separating. And that, there's this term broken home, and the assumption is that a broken home is when a husband and wife or a couple split. But actually, a broken home can be a couple that choose to stay together, like we mentioned earlier, for 40 years. And it's so unhealthy and dysfunctional and toxic that it's rotting the people inside and the children and everyone in that home. And, how many adult children will say, my parents should never have stayed together?
I hear this, and in first sessions, I almost always do a family diagram with couples. And very often I will say, are your parents living, are they together or separate? And lots of people have said over the years, they're together, but they shouldn't be.
Exactly. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
The longevity is there, but it's definitely not, they're not role modeling the kind of relationship you want to have. And actually, the irony, back to your irony, the irony is that the children that have come from those homes often have such a negative association with marriage
Yes.
that they think, I just definitely don't want to be married. If that's what marriage looks like, I don't want it. Thank you very
Yep.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So how can people get in touch with you if they would like to either, avail themselves of your coaching services, and also, of course, how can they find your book?
Thank you for asking. Okay, so my book, I'm going to just do a little show and tell. Here you go, Uncomplicated Love. And it's available on Amazon, or you can order it and I can send it to you from my website. So I go as the relationship architect. And so that's tracoaching.com. And you can order it from there, or you can contact me. And I work with people all around the world. That's the work that I do. I have very few slots available for local people, because I really enjoy the international work. That's and I'm also a leadership coach. So as the coaching, as I mentioned, that the couple counseling moved to relationship coaching. So I started to get invited into organizations to work with people that had challenging relationships in a professional space. So two directors or a subordinate and a superior. And so I was brought into corporate environments to help with building and creating healthy relationships in a corporate space. So I do still work and work with couples and those 5 lanes that I shared with you. And I also am working in corporate spaces predominantly to help create thriving environments in the workspace, thriving relationships in the workspace.
Well, we'll be sure to put those the link to TRA coaching
Thank you.
in this session notes. Thank you so much for doing this.
It's been amazing. It makes a big difference. Just as to say to you, thank you so much for your due diligence, taking the time to read the book and to have a conversation with people who understand the context from where it's coming from. It's a very different type of conversation.
Yeah.
That's why I always like to read, if I can. I can't always pull it off, but if I can, I always like to read the folks' books before we talk about them.
Amazing.
I always appreciate that
so
when people
much.
did that for me too. So indeed. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Judy, and thank you, Bruce. It's really been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate your time and for inviting me here today.
It's been our pleasure. Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed that interview as much as we enjoyed talking to Shelley. She was just delightful.
She was indeed. And so, we'll have the information, as I mentioned, the information about how to get in touch with her is in the notes for this episode. Just a brief reminder on our way out. First of all, buy our books.
Right.
You already know that. And review our books, please. Just saying, if you've come this far with us in this episode, by golly, you're one of those folks who would be willing to take a couple of minutes, doesn't take long, go to the pages for my book, for Judy's book, and leave a review, because reviews are really, I am told by my promotion person, reviews are really key, especially when you've first introduced a book.
Exactly.
And also let folks know about our podcast. You can go to our podcast website, which has been floating above our heads for those of you who are viewing this, and for those of you who are just listening to it, it is ctin7.com. That's the number 7, ctin7.com, the CT for couples therapy. ctin7.com, and that's where you can, among other things, sign up to be on my mailing list for my newsletter, which comes out about every month or so. And it's just, I have fun writing it. I think people will have fun reading it.
And if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, you can also sign up at ctn7.com to be a guest.
You can, and you'll see if you go to the podcast tab at that website and scroll down, you'll see there's a place that goes right to our calendar, and you can sign up for a slot. And numbers of people have done that, and by golly, virtually everybody who has done that, we have wanted to have on because they've had interesting stuff to say, and I'll bet that's you too.
Or you can write to us and give us feedback as well.
Absolutely. And so until next time,
remember, be kind,
don't panic,
and have faith.